But if you go back to, I think one of the themes of today, or the theme of today, and that this is the boundaries. I guess we have to start out with the idea that we have this stuff which you called, interestingly enough, CAMT, complementary and alternative and traditional medicine. Mm-hmm. The point is that's complementary, and we have to find a boundary. Now, if you look at some of the medical traditions in Europe, acupuncture is now part of mainstream, whether other countries accept this or not. So I think it's all about these shifting boundaries as one of the core issues we need to look at. Drugs of abuse is another interesting example, I think, because again, not all of them were necessarily considered in the beginning as a drug of abuse. Some were, others weren't. So I think what we need to think is really, in this context, that where are the boundaries and which ones are meaningful? I'm more and more convinced that the food medicine boundary is a very meaningful one. But each of us may draw it in a somewhat different way. I also think the boundary between biomedicine and some of these other medical traditions is very meaningful. But again, biomedicine has been very successful in integrating all sorts of things, and that is continuing, at the same time opposing other ones. So the question is, where are these boundaries moving, and where are they stable?
Anybody like to? I mean, if I can respond, I mean, I think you've hit on a very good point there. But, I mean, we've talked about the historical boundaries, and we've talked about them, in relation to the evolution of commercial and economic interests. What we haven't talked about is the metaphysical boundaries. Mm-hmm. And certainly in my limited experience of the debate around food, complementary medicine, very often the metaphysical boundaries are not looked at because they're too complicated, because people just don't want to be told that they're superstitious and believe in fairies. So I think that you're right, and what I'm arguing for is in a sense a discussion about those metaphysical boundaries, because as far as I'm concerned, science doesn't have any metaphysical commitments.
It cannot have. By definition, we're not dealing with metaphysics as natural scientists. That's by definition. You can't really argue outside of this box. But yes, the metaphysical part is of one of it. But I'm more and more convinced that the interest is less in this whole discussion about metaphysics. The focus is in fact, in the end, about economics, which I think is the driving force between many of these discussions.
Yeah.
And your figures about the overall sums and the minuteness of the herbal sector, or the CAM sector in general, is certainly very important. But and again, then this sector, the health food sector, CAM sector, is again investing in areas which are not necessarily tackling the main problems. It's all about well-being, lifestyle, sexual health, body shape, body performance, etc., etc. So these are some of the biggest growth areas of growth in this area. Yeah. And that's where you find most, not clinical, but intervention studies.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Not in the prevention of chronic heart failure.
No. So the economics determines the economics, the way in which the business case.
You're coming to the Marxist argument. Sorry, yeah, that's where you're getting it. The economics determines our consciousness.
Well, I thought that was what you just said.
Maybe I did it also, but you were sort of rephrasing it.
So some contribution from the back there before.
I don't know if it's useful, but there was an article recently in the medicine, where it showed that people with non-small cell lung cancer that were referred to a palliative care team early in their disease trajectory, compared to those that weren't referred to palliative care, lived for longer. And this opened a whole debate in the States where they're trying to change the system now, and a new debate where people with cancer, very advanced cancer, end up being in ITU and getting very expensive treatments until they have their last breath. And this article brought a new interest, a lot of talk in the papers, saying that if you do less things in palliative care, like palliative care, you could then actually have people living longer and having a better quality of life. So I think maybe there's too much money that can't be afforded by individuals and by the state to pay for very expensive treatments, and maybe gradually people will start looking at something else. I said that to another conference recently, that the lady that got the Nobel Prize for Medicine last year, Elizabeth Blackburn, for discovering telomerase, which is an enzyme that in us that makes sure that our genes, our chromosomes stay long and healthy. And if telomerase disappears, then our chromosomes disappear and we die. It has to do with aging. She did a research where she showed that people that meditate for a number of months, they increase the telomerase in the blood. So you're talking about metaphysics and what is it that people do when they meditate. And what she actually showed was when they meditate, they have a biological change which is measured, which makes the chromosomes stay healthier for longer. So just because we can't measure it and see it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And the four humors theory, or the theories that they have in Chinese medicine, we can't comprehend in terms of our current theories, but in 100 years it may be different.
Yeah. Anybody else like to, or is everything that is to be said on this issue been said?
We haven't talked about the naughty supermarkets who only sell crisps in giant bags.
Well,
food is now. We're talking Tesco, Sainsbury's, aren't we? Really?
yeah.
How can the monster be slain, or reduced, or
Sorry, beg your pardon.
well, I'm
Those
just
of us behind you might not be able to hear what you said.
I was just wondering about how the monopoly of supermarkets and how they sell products, i.e., bags, super big bags of crisps and things, be controlled,
Yeah.
rather than controlling the people, more controlling the.
I mean, I think what's being said is that foods, as currently dispensed to the population, appear to be rather poisonous or have negative health effects. You know, there's been chief scientific officers' report on, and you were involved in all this. That. What about regulation of the food industry? Why do we have regulation of the pharmaceutical industry and not regulation of the food industry? Is it because there isn't enough evidence, or? And I'd be interested to hear from you, Anne, because you've clearly got.
I'm not sure that I was involved in whatever it was you referred
I thought you were involved in food and obesity, and that's no. Got you wrong. Sorry.